This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening to all members in Chennai who have joined today's webinar. And firstly, a very warm welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Raj Subramaniam. I'm Vijay Narayanan, VP Professional Development of the PMI Chennai chapter, and I'll be your host for this session. This is the 12th webinar in the series of webinars since the lockdown. Once again, my sincere thanks to all chapter members for supporting this webinar series. The constant support and encouragement has helped us to get better with the webinar series month on month now. As always, a few quick housekeeping announcements. Please can I request everyone other than the speaker to be on mute throughout the session. Also, please turn off your video for a better webinar experience. One PDF will be provided to all attendees of this session. In case you've not received anything, any PDUs for the earlier sessions, please do get in touch with me. I will share a link to a feedback form for this session on the chat window later during this webinar. Please fill and submit the form so that your PDU can be processed without any delay. If you have any questions for Raj, please post them on the chat window during the session, and we'll cover them in the Q&A section at the end. So let's get into this session. I'm sure everyone is aware of campaigns such as Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is self-reliant India. So what is the role of academia in R&D in India? How can collaboration between the industry and academia contribute to the aforementioned campaigns? Well, most importantly, what is the role of project managers in facilitating this? The topic for today's session is industry-academia interaction for innovation and commercialization of R&D, and it's going to be presented by Mr. Raj. Mr. Raj Subramaniam has over 25 years of technology, business, transformation, and change management experience. As a CTO at IIT Madras Research Park, Raj enables technology development and collaboration, leading to innovation across the R&D companies, incubated startups, centers of excellence, and the academia. Raj recently relocated to Chennai from the US. While in the US, Raj managed transformational changes within the Department of Transportation in the state of New Jersey. For close to 15 years, Raj executed product and service strategies for a highly successful tech startup, helping large global corporations automate and optimize their network inventory, mobile services, associated processes, and expenses. In this role, Raj also contributed towards team building, collaboration, best practices, and development of metrics. Raj is passionate about working with teams and firmly believes that a team on mission delivers a substantially higher value than the sum of its individual parts. Raj holds a BE degree from Madurai Kamaraj University and a PG DBA from Loyola. He has also completed PMP, Scrum Master, and blockchain certifications. So without further ado, it is our pleasure to welcome Raj this evening to this webinar. Over to you, Mr. Raj.
Great, thank you very much, Vijay. I really appreciate that. To lead to this whole session that we have today on industry-academia interaction. Like to certainly thank all attendees that are in the webinar today. Obviously, it would be great if we have these webinars as seminars or knowledge sharing meetings face-to-face. We used to have that before, obviously, as we all know. I do remember attending one of the last ones that we had face-to-face, probably somewhere in the month of early March, I think. And certainly looking forward to having more such sessions in the future. Over the next 40-45 minutes, what I'd like to do is to kind of give you an overview of what this is all about and how industry-academia interaction could potentially be a game changer in our country from an innovation and R&D perspective. Hoping you're able to see my screen. So in terms of the agenda, what we'll do is I'll talk a little bit about the challenge that we have today. And we'll delve into a little more detail on R&D versus innovation. So there's R&D, there's innovation. What's the difference? Do they mean the same? We'll try to kind of get a little bit of insight onto that. And we'll will provide a potential solution on how this can be achieved and how this has been achieved, I should say. And the role of project managers, which I think is pretty critical. And project managers could be great enablers of industry-academia interaction. And in fact, I've probably heard in one of those PMI podcasts about the PM's role as an innovator is something that is not very highly recognized, but that is something that every PM does, because essentially any project is making something real happen, and that is innovation in a way. So every PM is an innovator. So let's kind of give a round of applause for each one of us, and let's get started here. I'll give you a little bit of a historical perspective, given India's India's path, I should say, or India's way as we get into the academia and how things happened in the past. Once India became independent, we certainly wanted all these technology institutions to come into the country, and Pandit Nehru, who was our first prime minister, called them as temples of knowledge. So we have the country set up all these very successful, high-quality institutions, academic institutions, the IISc, which was even there before, I should say, but then it kind of made huge strides after the independence. And then you have the IITs, obviously, and then came the NITs. So we have several such institutions that do provide very high-quality education, and they had some of the best teachers, and they still do. Especially, in fact, I'm a little more associated with IIT Madras, so I should say, when IIT Madras was started almost about 61 years ago now. So we celebrated 60 years last year. In fact, we had the Prime Minister attending the convocation just on the same time, I should say, last year. So we had IIT Madras was started with a collaboration with the Federal Republic of Germany at that time. And there were German professors in IIT Madras until even, I should say, about the mid-70s, late 70s. And a lot of German equipment were provided in the lab. So they had some of the best teachers, not only teachers from India, but also teachers from abroad. And students obviously have made a mark all over the world. If we look at the alumni of IIT, not only IIT Madras, but also the other IITs plus the other institutions, they are making great strides. So that is a huge plus in terms of what the institutions have been able to produce. And they have a lot of focus on R&D, and typically what we call that as like a fundamental research or basic research is what they've been doing all along. And this is, again, significantly enhanced, I should say, over the years. For example, IIT Madras has, I believe, has about 1,300 patents that has been granted. They've kind of published over 3,000 research articles and whatnot. So that's a great achievement all by itself. But there's been very minimal industry impact, I should say, across the country from what kind of impact the academia has had in the industry. If you ask that question, the answer is there's bits and patches. You see, there's some activities going on here and there, but then it is not something that we can all be proud of. It's certainly an area where there's been little translation of R&D into the industry, I should say. So the industry primarily has all along been somehow more focused on getting a technology transfer or license and doing the manufacturing. And essentially, industry has relied on the manpower that comes out of these academic institutions. The engineers have played a great role in terms of from a manufacturing perspective, as well as from a design perspective. The impact has been very minimal, I should say, especially because the technology is imported. And it's more of manufacturing and management and less, if you will, from a R&D perspective. So the industry impact from the academia has been really minimal all along. And this has impacted the country in a very negative way, which we'll go through. So this has led to this kind of a belief where the academia thinks the industry is not interested in R&D. So they really just want to keep importing stuff. They come to us for some specific, very specific problems, which we're able to solve easily. So it's not that the industry doesn't really prioritize doing R&D, which is critical for the country's development, I should say. But then from an industry perspective, the industry thinks academia is all about like publishing or patents, and they can't really solve our problems. So that is the industry's view of academia. And the academia's view, as I just outlined, is that industry is not really much interested in this whole thing. So that kind of creates the challenge. So the fact that these two pillars, I should say, are not working together essentially means that whatever research work that's being done is not leading to what we would want to call as innovation. So now we'll kind of delve into a little more detail on what is R&D and what is innovation and how are they two linked, and can we have one without the other? So we'll try to kind of get into a little more detail about that. So when you talk about R&D versus innovation, you want to read this slide top to bottom, left to right. So if you look at the very first item on the top, R&D turns money into knowledge, which we can understand. Essentially, it creates a knowledge pool. It creates intellectual property. It could potentially create some patents. So that is something that happens out of R&D work. Whereas innovation essentially takes it forward. So innovation creates products. It kind of envisions products. It makes a business out of this knowledge. So that's the critical role, I would say, that innovation plays in this whole in this grand scheme of things. And again, R&D is more about technology, which is important. Without technology, there's probably no innovation. So that's a given. But then the innovation is more about taking the technology and bringing out products and services to the market fast. Innovation is all about creating value, making essentially having somebody pay you for the service that you provide, the value that is provided is what innovation is all about. So that's another subtle difference there between R&D and innovation. The other thing is R&D could stretch for several years. R&D could happen for 10 years, 20 years, depending on the kind of projects. Like, for example, if you have to launch a satellite, or if ISRO plans a mission to the Mars. So those are things that obviously can't happen in a very short time frame. Whereas the individual pieces of that, where there is that innovation that happens when you take a certain part of the R&D that is being done and get it out to the industry. So innovation, think of it more of some kind of an iterative process, whereas R&D takes a longer duration, but then ultimately delivers individual bits and pieces that could be further innovated as we go along. So that's another difference there. And the most important fact here is R&D and innovation can be achieved faster. So today we have the industry always looking at innovation, and they want to get results faster. And that's one way to make that, to achieve that, is by having partnerships. So with the way technology is going, with the way you have multidisciplinary academic institutions focus on analytics or artificial intelligence. So those have become the kind of binding cord across all the engineering disciplines. And the knowledge that exists in the industry today is certainly not to the level where they can go all by themselves and do the R&D and do the innovation. So that's the reason why we certainly think that partnerships is the way to go. Because if you want to come up with a new product, and it's going to take maybe like 100,000 hours for you to do it, and it might take a certain amount of money to do that, what if you tie up with somebody who has some know-how that can help you get there and sooner at a lesser cost? So that's where the partnership really comes. Obviously, those are things that are much more prevalent, I should say, globally. And India, these things are kind of happening these days, but certainly were not happening before. So there's no innovation without R&D, but R&D is just the first step. So that's something you want to think about. So you can't really have innovation without R&D because R&D leads to innovation. Then R&D is just the first step because ultimately you want to take that invention or discovery all the way to from an incubation perspective or acceleration perspective, understand the market dynamics, conceive a product that could come out of it, and then go validate that with your clients, put a business model around it, go market it. So this whole aspect is taking that innovation or the research that occurred in the first place and innovate all along to get it to the finish line. So that's why I'm saying here that R&D is key, but it is the very first step in the journey of innovation, if you will. So you can't just stop with R&D. So no matter how amazing your discovery or invention could be, it is just the beginning of the process. So it's really key that for any technology, for it to reach its potential, it needs to mature into a business. So unless you see that coming out as a business, I do have a slide some further down where I would say some of the achievements of Stanford's innovation laboratories, if you will, what kind of impact they've had in the US and globally. You'll see that. So, and all those things have happened as a result of the technology being licensed to a business, or as technologies mature, they kind of get more into a full-fledged business where you can successfully market them and essentially commercialize your innovation and obviously reap the benefits of that. So the innovation journey, as I mentioned, essentially begins with R&D, but that's just the first step. We need to create, what that really means is we want to create environments where R&D and innovation can kind of thrive. So that's the area where, as a country, we've kind of lagged behind for the past several years, and that has resulted in a relatively weak position of India today globally, where you see that India hardly spends about 0.6 to 0.7% of our GDP in R&D, whereas a country like Israel spends about 5%. A country like China is substantially higher than what we do. So that's the challenge there is we didn't have an environment to make this all work together. And this is one of the things I've picked up from a legendary professor in IIT Madras. His name is Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala, and he kind of believes in this, and he's completely is bought out in this concept where innovation essentially thrives where you have people who kind of think differently come together. So you have on the academia side, you have people who the professors, the research scholars with a very deep knowledge, and some of them with a very broad knowledge. So that is one aspect of it. And then you have the industry that essentially knows how to market the product, how to manufacture the product, how to scale it, how to support it. So those are things that the industry brings in. And then you have this whole the startup ecosystem, or the students. Essentially, these are people who don't believe in that something can't be done. So they are very strong in their beliefs. They want to do the impossible, and they don't think anything is impossible. They essentially think everything is possible. They are able to put the amount of work that it takes to, them to get there. So that fearlessness, or there's no what do you say, like they don't have any preconceived notions that, hey, this could be possible, as this not possible. As we get older, we do get those things, but then as a student, I know when we were all students, we were probably thinking the same way. So the result of all this, how do you get this all working, is what we call as an innovation ecosystem. So you essentially want to build an ecosystem where you could have all those aspects that we just spoke about happen in unison, so that the output of all that effort is the innovation. So the first aspect, basic research, we also talked about that earlier in terms of pursuit of knowledge, understanding of behavior, getting a good fundamental knowledge on how things work, on how a material behaves, or how a certain chemical could potentially be a better option to build a battery, for example, than something else. We've seen that there are new research reports coming out. We also looked at how the COVID-related innovations are happening in the country. So in terms of that, is the pursuit of knowledge is part of the basic research. That leads to what you call as applied research or translational research, which essentially is focused on challenging the industry and helping them solve problems. So that is the technology development as it relates to getting the industry problems answered or industry problems solved. And then you have the translation of that technology into the products that the market needs. You don't want to get a product that the market doesn't need, or you might have to create a market for those products. And then the pricing obviously matters as well. So in a country like India, as we all know, our affordability is relatively less when compared to the other countries. So when you build products for India, that is something you have to bear in mind. And when it comes to commercialization, then how do you scale it up? So I have a prototype. I have this product that I think is going to be like a killer product. And then how do I go about manufacturing it? How do I set up a marketing network for that? Do I do it myself, or do I do it with a partner, or do I do it online? Several questions that come up as we go to the commercialization aspect of the whole the product innovation that you're working on. So those are all things that kind of get to get them answered. One of the things that IIT Madras did several years ago was to come up with what we call as this research park, which is right adjacent to IIT Madras. Many of the PMI events used to happen there prior to the pandemic, I should say. And we essentially have about more than 1 million square feet of collaborative workspace that's available, where industry comes in, they come and innovate, and this kind of just a visual of the research park itself. So this is something that IIT Madras did as its own way of enhancing or enabling innovation to happen in the country, and this is the very first, or one of its kind, I should still say, in the country from a university-based research park perspective. You'll see several R&D companies, you'll see several startup ecosystems over there, several incubators, all working together and innovating. This is certainly a place, if you've not been before, certainly something you want to look into. So when it comes to the innovation system elements, so what are the various things that make this all work together? So we kind of talked about the environment, we talked about the ecosystem. So what is this ecosystem made of? So one is you certainly need the R&D work to be done, right? So you need the exploratory research to happen, your basic research to happen, and that's obviously something the academia is very well versed, and they do this extremely well, and they've been very successful at that. And there is some element of industry partnership there. So there could be certain organizations that might have told a certain academician that I need to understand this, do some research on this, I'll sponsor that. So that activity kind of happens. And then the applied work, the translational research, is where there's a substantial industry partnership that is being realized today. So you do have within the IIT Madras ecosystem what we call as centers of excellences. or you have the incubators. So these are the enablers, I should say, of getting the basic research ready for the to challenge to solve the industry challenge. So that's the substantial industry partnership. That is something which would happen as part of the translational research activity. And then that could essentially result in what you might call as a prototype. So, and then essentially it comes out as a product. And as part of that, you really need to also look at how do you handle this whole product? How do you take this entire product to see what kind of an opportunity it provides? You might have certainly talked with a couple of industry personnel. They might have looked at it in a certain way, but then could there be other applications? Could there be other use cases? Could there be how could this product behave in a different like, for example, if you look at, I still kind of go back to the battery example I provided earlier, because we have electrical vehicles using battery today, but could the same battery be used somewhere else? Could there be other applications for that? What could be the technologies associated with that? So all that kind of a mapping and of this entire opportunity landscape, that's something that needs to happen, which is one of the key roles, I should say, of this innovation team that works part and parcel of this whole R&D organization to take this research and invention further. So you certainly need, at that point, you might say that, oh, this product is whatever invention that we have is almost here, but then it needs to go here. So that there could be some refinement there. So there could be some additional work there. And then then comes the whole the business model and the commercialization strategy. How do you go about doing it? Do you want to do it yourself? Do you want to, as a startup, I may not have the money to do that, or if I'm going to license this to the industry, am I doing it at the right cost? Maybe maybe the product is much more valuable. Am I realizing the right amount of royalties? Or those are all things that, as an entrepreneur or as an R&D, the innovation team needs to kind of look at and decide as to what's your commercialization strategy. Could this be licensed, or could this be and the industry could kind of take that and then manufacture it to scale. So which is something the industry is very good at doing, because as I mentioned before, we do have the industries doing transfer technology for all the imported technologies today, and they are extremely good at scaling it up. They're extremely good at setting up like a line, a manufacturing line where this product could be manufactured and then tested and then marketed, distributed, the whole 9 yards, if you will. And then how do you do that? You want to do that through a startup. So again, the challenge could be that an established industry could potentially want to kill a certain innovation, because they might think that there could be a risk involved if they allow this startup to flourish, because that could be disrupting the whole business. As we've seen in the past few years, so many disruptions have happened. Some of them have provided great value, like the Swiggies or the Ubers or the Olas, while they kind of disrupted the established industry, but we find tremendous value in them today. So those are, again, game changers. So the question then would be, is that something that, do I still want to go to the industry to license it, or do I do it all by myself? If I get the right kind of funding, can I go create the market? Can I take the risk? And while the industry is not either willing to take the risk, or the industry is wanting to kind of kill that innovation. So that's those are the aspects that the innovation team has to certainly look about. And in this slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of the IIT Madras's incubation innovation ecosystem. So it gives you a perspective of how innovation really happens. Why is this place a very successful, buzzing place where you have 70 odd R&D companies on the top, as you see here, and you have a couple of hundred startup companies that are working on different sectors, if you will, and they are being enabled by incubators. So you have a nodal incubator, you have an incubator that's focused on social technologies, you have one focused on biotech and medtech, data sciences, AI, and then batteries, electric vehicles. The alumni obviously play a significant role in supporting this entire ecosystem, if you will. Civet, which is working on 5G standards. Again, one of the unique aspects of the research activity and the innovation activity that's going on. Center for Clean Water, again, very focused on making sure that there is less removal of arsenic in the water that you find in several parts of the country, which makes it makes the water, that the groundwater makes it difficult to consume. So they're coming with different technologies that could make this all affordable. The focus again is not to say that I'll go buy a distillery at 20 rupees or 15 rupees a liter, and then how can I do it at a cost that is affordable to somebody who's out there and making much less money than what many of us make. So the Center for Urban Development, the buildings and the environments, again, they focus on smart city-based technologies. Manufacturing, again, they are looking at how to using robots as well as smart manufacturing, IoT-based design techniques, and Healthcare Technology Innovation Center. Again, they focus on coming up with healthcare innovations in the country. We are obviously supported by the government of India in terms of the initial grant that the government provided in building the research park. And obviously, the state of Tamil Nadu has provided us with the land, I should say. So that's how this whole the physical infrastructure of the research park came up. But then what really makes it work is all these individual elements of this innovation ecosystem, and all the kind of partnerships that happen. Like the startup here could go talk to an R&D company, or they could tie up with a incubator, or they could have a connect with an alumni, or they could go work with the International Center for Clean Water. So there's so much of interaction that is possible. That's where I was mentioning before. You have the academia that's right in the middle, and then you have the centers, and then you have the companies and the startups that essentially make this a worthwhile innovation ecosystem. And obviously, IIT Madras, as you know, is one of India's top institutions, and it is for the past 4 or 5 years they've been ranked #1 from an engineering category as well as from an innovation category. And that award came just about a week or so ago. That I'm not added here, but that's again something for us to know. And that is all made possible by this 600 plus globally acclaimed faculty members, research scholars, the labs, the facilities, the innovation centers, the publications, and the patents that they've worked on. So together, all this makes up what you would term as a place where you would like innovation to happen, and that's been the reason, I should say, for the success of this innovation ecosystem. So this is our goal now, is to see what we can do to get this kind of an ecosystem established in other parts of the country, other universities, how we can take advantage of what we have done here for the benefit of India, to make this Atmanirbhar Bharat or the self-reliant India happen. And why do you want to do that, right? So as for long as a country, we've been kind of a consumer of knowledge. We have not been a producer of knowledge. And that is something that hurts the country like India as we are emerging as one of the large economies. We really want to get there. And R&D leading to innovation is critical for that. So we need to, it's again fundamental for the country to get there for our own security, because if you don't get the kind of technologies you need, then you are reliant on other countries, and to what extent they provide you, depending on the kind of relationship you have with them. We all see what's happening with China today. We all see some of the economies, even for example, in the US, trying to close themselves out. So each country, to some extent, every country, especially large economies, have to fend for themselves. And India is in a position today where we are, primarily because we couldn't focus on that whole innovation, establishing that innovation ecosystem. And that's something we really need to focus on and get it done quickly. And again, they are key drivers of productivity. And there's some numbers that I'm showing here in terms of what Europe, the kind of growth Europe achieved, and primarily how it was attributed to R&D, for example. And then, as I was mentioning before, as a percentage, it's been at 0.6% for almost like in the past 2 decades. For almost for the past 20 years, our R&D spend has been just about 0.6 to 0.7%, which is a huge challenge for the country as a whole. And that is the reason why we are in the situation where we are today. Again, R&D leads to IP, and IP leads to copyrights, licenses, and those kind of reflect the kind of productivity or the innovative activity that's happening in the country. And as we get there, that's when we get seats in top committees or top research, setting up standards. For example, I was mentioning earlier, like the Center for Wireless Technologies is working on standards development for 5G in India. And that is something we totally as a country missed the bus when it happened with 3G or 4G or LTE technologies, where we just couldn't find a place because we didn't really have the weight. So now with the kind of market that we have and with whatever additional research work that's happening, we are getting a seat, but I think there's much more work that needs to be done where we can focus on developing standards that would make these technologies much more affordable for a country like India. So this graphic is relatively old, but then it still conveys the message to you. So this you'll see as a percentage of GDP, India, which is represented in the black here, it's kind of stagnant, and that's happening even today. So it was like 0.5, even like that was like in 2007, 2008. But even in 2020, we are still around the same number, which is the challenge. Whereas if you look at China, China was doing much worse than India in the late 70s and early 80s, if you will. But then see how they peaked. So this is something that didn't happen in our country. And if you look at a country like Israel is represented here. So they spend about 4.5% of their GDP in R&D. So that's the kind of that determines the success of the country itself in terms of the amount of money you spend on R&D and innovation. That kind of to some extent measures the success of you as a country. So look at what opportunity this provides. So for a country like us, so if you look at the overall R&D globalization business opportunity, that's almost about $300 billion in the year 2021. And the skills that we have, especially when it comes to software or embedded systems, constitute a big percentage of that. So that is a huge opportunity that, and this is essentially not basic R&D being developed in the country for the country, but this is more of software or the development, engineering, design activities we are doing for MNCs like the Microsoft or the Facebooks or the Caterpillars. So those are the things that we are capturing here from an opportunity perspective. And we are looking at our own global engineering market where we are supporting all these initiatives of global MNCs to reach this number, like about $40 billion this year. And as a country, we want to, again, this is an aspirational goal right now. So that as a country, we want to get from this 0.6, 0.7 that I was mentioning to about 2% of GDP by 2022. So that you'll imagine R&D needs to go almost like fourfold or more than threefold the next, we are almost done with 2020. So we almost just have a couple of years left. So in 2 years, we have to grow like more than threefold. So that's the aspirational goal here. And also, we obviously want to do more exports, and we want to be the top 10. A lot of good goals for us to aspire for. But again, the primary reason why we've been stagnant all along is because of this absence of this efficient R&D innovation ecosystem. And that's, as the Prime Minister has mentioned, is very critical for a self-reliant India. So what do we need to do in order to be reliant on our own technologies when it comes to defense, for example? When I see the events that are happening in China, we've within the research park, I see a lot of activities where startups have been asked to work with the defense organizations to come up with innovation. So there's an urgency that we are seeing today. But then that is something it's nice to see that happening today, but obviously it's something you should have seen happening several years ago. So what is the role of the PMs or the project managers in all of this? So that is something that we all need to kind of think about. So delivery obviously is one of the most important aspects of a project manager is delivering the project. So delivering innovation as a result of R&D, as well as taking it all the way to commercialization, is something that a project manager is very well versed or capable of doing, I should say, especially somebody who has the ability to see the big picture, somebody who's obviously has all the PM skills, I should say, in terms of the triple constraints and all that goes with that, and meetings and task lists and progress, all those things are there. But then somebody who really sees the big picture, somebody who wants to kind of see for himself or herself a role where you would want to enable innovation to happen in the country. And obviously, soft skills are much more important than the hard skills are kind of taken as granted. But then soft skills is what makes you successful, I should say, when it comes to dealing with people. Because again, when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to innovation, there are several stakeholders involved, several people involved. They have the egos, they have the way the academia thinks, the way the startups think, the way the industry thinks is totally different. So somebody who has the skills to kind of bring them all together, I think that is something that a successful project manager really does. The good collaborative skills and communications and all the ability to manage all the stakeholders that are involved. Not an easy task, obviously, but then it is something that as PMs, we should aspire to be enablers, I should say, of this innovation engine that we want India to become. And we can't really afford to miss this time. So in the past 2-3 decades, we've seen several technologies emerge, and these have taken us by the storm in terms of how the mobile technology, as we all seen, how it's made a huge difference. But then the kind of value that India added to that whole development is very minimal, I should say. This kind of tells you where India is today in industry academia collaboration. So we are ranked number 45, and that kind of explains all our challenges that I mentioned before. Countries that are on top, Israel is number 1, and where the United States, even they are still number 4. I would have thought they would be number 1, but they are number 4. And you have other countries that are making huge strides there. And a country like China is like in the 20s. And this information is all, I've identified some sources, which I have as another slide coming later. But this is all publicly available information. There's this Global Innovation Index that was released just a couple of weeks ago for the year 2020. Then it gets released every year. So India's made some good progress, but then there's still ways to go there. This gives you a perspective of what innovation and industry academia collaboration can do. Gives you an idea. So I want to just highlight a couple items here, but then this is something that I picked from the Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing. So this is the timeline of the inventions that have happened out of Stanford University that have been commercialized, and the amount of money Stanford has realized from them is what you see in the parentheses here. So the two things that I wanted to focus here, that MIMO for wireless broadcast. Not sure how many people know MIMO technology, but then we are all using it today in our cell phones, like a 4G or a 5G, essentially is multiple in, multiple out. So it gives you the ability to send signals to realize high speed. So now we're all enjoying the speeds that we're getting, but that's all enabled by MIMO. And that was done by one of our own Indian professors in Stanford. In fact, he was working as in the Indian Navy, I should say, and he was heading some of the R&D establishments of the Indian Navy. Then he went as a professor to Stanford, like in the late 80s, early 90s. And this MIMO technology was something that he invented. And that is realized about just as royalties, about more than $1 million for Stanford. And this number you should see, it's pretty staggering, right? So the Google's hypertext searching, that is something that was developed by the Google founders when they were scholars in Stanford, and that technology owned by Stanford fetched them more than $300 million, and that was like in 2005, 2006. If they had waited further, they could have made probably much more money there. This gives you a perspective of the inventions that have happened again in Stanford since 1970. There's about 10,000 invention disclosures by faculty and students, out of which like 3 of them are generating more than $100 million. 77 more than $1 million. So as you see, the number of very successful inventions are obviously much less. But then it's kind of staggering to see the amount of inventions that have happened, the patents that have been issued. So that's the R&D work that's going on, and how they are kind of commercializing that R&D through their startup ecosystem, through their technology licensing mechanisms. This kind of gives you a perspective of what industry academia collaboration is really capable of delivering for the country. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. So this is just a technology readiness level. So how technology emerges out from basic research all the way to launch and operations. So the TRL 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when somebody says I'm going to do a tech demonstration, you are probably in this level. And while TRL 1 and 2 is primarily research, anything that is 3, 4, 5 to 9 is all about innovation, where you take the research done, take it all the way up to commercialization. Okay, so this kind of difficult to read, but I would certainly make this deck available with the PMI team. So if you're interested, to be shared, gives you an idea of the whole R&D revenues and spending by country, spending by region. You see the North America here, you see the rest of the world. India is kind of part of the rest of the world. You see how China is going, how Japan is done, how Europe is done. So again, this gives you an industry-wise R&D spending, and kind of gives you a perspective. Again, this is sourced from, the sourcing information is right below, and gives you an idea. And I'm going to, I do have probably a couple more slides, but then probably going to end up here in terms of most of this information that I've shared with you today. I've got a good chunk of it from Professor Jinwala, as well as in terms of the EAC report is primarily an economic advisory committee of the Prime Minister of India. So they have a website. These, again, reports are publicly available. Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing, that's again publicly available. Global Innovation Index, again available. Harvard Business Review has some great articles on how to distinguish between innovation and R&D. There's a lot of people kind of put them in the same bucket, and then there are quite a few solid research work done by Harvard Business Review on how to distinguish between the two and how to set up like an innovation organization. A lot of good articles there if you'd like to study further on that. So with that, I kind of come to the end of the presentation. I know it's probably a little quick here. We probably have about 10 minutes here for question answers, just in case if there are any. So I'll kind of hand this over to Vijay to see if we can take any questions here.
Raj, perfect timing. Thank you. Thanks firstly for the presentation. Some really interesting facts and perspectives on research, innovation, industry, academia. A lot of it synonymously we've used actually without knowing the deeper understanding of them. So thank you for demystifying those for us.
Thank you.
There are several questions. So I appreciate maybe a fairly quick response, maybe short response, so we can get through most of the questions that viewers have asked us today. The first question comes from Shantakumar. India is generally seen as a cost leadership market, where global companies only look for sourcing their already developed products. Currently, most of the innovations, the technologies and products are usually developed outside of India. How do you see the India market becoming more differentiated in terms of product market leadership?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in the sense that India has always been seen from a cost arbitrage perspective, I would say. And as I was mentioning in the presentation as well, the industry feels more comfortable importing the technology and then manufacturing it and selling it, and for obviously reasons that for the fact that we haven't really had a good solid R&D work that is required to be done. But then it also comes with a lot of its own challenges, like a couple of things that I've seen, especially, for example, when I talk about, we've been working with a few MSMEs recently in terms of how we can help them during this COVID pandemic, and manufacturing of masks is one of them, right? So you would think it's essentially low tech. There's nothing really high tech about manufacturing a mask. But then you have there's one aspect which makes it where we are really dependent today on imports. So when you manufacture a mask, you essentially, if you wanted to serve the purpose, you want three layers there, three layers of different kinds of fabric. So one is on the internal side that's kind of close to your mouth. There's something in the middle, which is a filter, and there's an external one that kind of hopefully acts as a reflector so that it doesn't, things don't stick, right? So you have to essentially, when you see these masks, you will see that they are not really stitched, right, at the edges. You also have the elastic that you kind of put it around your ears. So how the elastic fits into the how is kind of stuck into the mask, that how the three layers are stitched together. There's some technology that comes into play there, which is called ultrasonic welding. So there's a welding that's happening there actually, and that welding is happening at ultrasonic frequencies, and that kind of binds those three layers of clothing items together. And as a country, we don't have that. We have not produced those ultrasonic welding machines ourselves. There's a machine, there's a transducer. Again, from a tech perspective, it's nothing challenging. Something we could have done, but obviously as a country, we've relied on getting it from like China, and then when China saw this market for masks going like skyrocketing in across the globe, they increased the prices. So now these ultrasonic welding machines are costing more, and they are of very poor quality. So those are again aspects where, as a country, we went sourcing these items from abroad, and now we are realizing that we need to do all these things ourselves. And there are several other applications for that as well. So any kind of packing industry could find a lot of applications for this ultrasonic welding. So as a country, I think we are innovation ready. It's just that we need to put our heads down and put something together and come up with products that are as I would say, like from a design perspective, as good as potentially European or German design as from a quality perspective as good as Japan, then from a cost perspective as less costing as less as possible from an Indian perspective. So for an India, you want to develop something for the Indian market that's of good quality, but then at an affordable cost. And that's where I think there is a huge opportunity here, and that is where we can differentiate us.
Right. There has also been a lot of other questions around how do they get in touch with you, Raj? Maybe if you could share your details at the end of the sessions, or maybe on the chat window. Many such as Sundaram, Venkatesan, Bhaskar, they would like to know how to get in touch with you, particularly in regards to things such as how to be part of the ecosystem of the the research, the incubation cells, and all the other things good things that happen within the research park. So I'd be grateful if you could share your. Yeah, thank you. You've already done that. I've seen that. Yeah. So
yeah, there is a reasonably good website, I should say, for the research park, and there's a reasonably good website for the incubation as well. So if you Google it, like Google IIT Madras Research Park, you should get it, and IIT Madras Incubation, you should get it. That kind of gives you an overview. And then if there's any areas, you could feel free to reach out to me. So I'll be glad to kind of assist you with that.
Okay. The next question comes from Dr. Afzal. Is the industry interested in the innovative idea to develop, or interested from where the idea is budding? I think this is probably on the premise that many new and innovative ideas are being sparked at tier 2 colleges, which unfortunately do not have enough fundings. So hence the idea is probably nipped in the bud, or they're lost in transition. So how is the industry and academia reacting to this? Great
question, actually. So one of the things that we are looking at from an IIT Madras incubation perspective, we are institution agnostic. So you don't have to be an IIT Madras graduate in order to incubate yourself in the ecosystem. And in fact, there are just about 50% of the incubatees today are from IIT Madras, and a substantial portion of these incubatees are people from tier 2, tier 3 institutions today. And I was also mentioning earlier about what the vision that the innovation ecosystem has is to kind of expand ourselves into these tier 2, tier 3 institutions and help those incubators, help the students also to that are, as you rightly said, that they are aspiring engineers. There could be several people there that if they are if they have the opportunity to work with some of the maybe with some good product teams, because most of the engineers that come out of, when I was an engineer, for example, I wanted to work in R&D, but then there wasn't much R&D happening in the country. So what do? Then you get your first job, and then from that point on, that kind of job determines your career. So that's probably many of us could kind of relate to that. But then the country certainly has good knowledge from a finance perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a manufacturing perspective. But the area where we really lag is top quality engineers, the top quality designers. And that is an area where we are very passionate about in terms of identifying this. We don't really want to identify the top 10. Like in India, I believe produces about 25 lakh engineers every year. That's the approximate high-level number. And then if you look at, even if you take the top 10% are going to probably go abroad or go to some other institutions or take profitable, high-paying employment in an MNC, you still have a huge pool of talent that's available that could be nurtured, and we could help them realize their potential. So that is an area where IIT Madras, as you might have seen recently, has even offered courses. Like there was an announcement earlier about a diploma or a degree course in data analytics. That is something that could be very attractive. That could help improvement of skills and knowledge for these individuals. And then we want to provide them opportunities. In fact, one of the visions of the research park is to see if we can get over the next 10 years or so, develop a program where we take about 1,000 engineers across these tier 2, tier 3 institutions and kind of to take them through the challenge of designing products, and we want to make top level engineers out of them. And some of them obviously will be successful, some of them may not, doesn't matter. But then the whole idea is to contribute towards developing that pool of talent in the country that we lack today.
Thanks, Raj. I'm just posting a message onto the chat window regarding the online BSc program that was launched by IIT Madras recently.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Just one last question. There are actually 3 sub-questions from Mr. Veera Raghavan, but conscious of time, maybe I'll just ask one of them. This is in regards to the incubation cell at IIT Madras. How do you shortlist projects, and what sort of support is provided? And what kind of domains are out of the incubation cell?
Okay. A very short answer to that would be to visit the IIT Madras Incubation Cell's website. That kind of gives you we are technology agnostic. We have, and we call ourselves a deep tech incubator, a product incubator. We wouldn't really have many of those e-commerce type startups there. The startups there are from like AI or robotics or manufacturing or engineering or chemicals or battery technology, for example, or waste management. So these are technology areas that these startups are from. So there isn't any restriction that the incubation cell poses in terms of we are only supporting these technologies, because essentially when you go to when these startup companies take up, they get incubated, they do have the opportunity to be mentored, if you will, by the alumni as well as from the faculty members of IIT. And essentially any kind of technology that you want to kind of incubate your startup, there's some level of knowledge, I should say, generally available within IIT. So there is no restriction, I would say, in terms of what the technology or what sector you're from. There's no restriction in terms of what institution you're from. And one more thing is another interesting piece of information here is about 40% of the startup companies are either owned or co-owned by IIT Madras faculty members. So that is something the institute is very passionate about. They want to promote the culture of entrepreneurship within the institute. So that is also something you'd see that is pretty unique, where you have the faculty members also doing the work of entrepreneurs. So that way you get to interact with them in a much more level playing field, if you will.
Thank you, Raj. On that note, I think we come to the end of this wonderful webinar. It has been very useful, and I can see a lot of comments from the attendees today that it's been fascinating. I would just like to remind people that the recording for this webinar will be posted on to the YouTube PMI Chennai chapter channel. So please do check back in a week's time, and this will be made available for you to watch again in case if you've missed any part of this webinar. So on that note, I'd like to thank Raj once again for this, sparing your time on a Saturday evening and then walking us through a lot of interesting and fascinating facts from both the industry and the research. A little memento that I've just shared on the screen, it's been, I will send it over to you, Raj. We'll be grateful if you could share it on your social media handles.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for the nice words, Vijay. I've certainly enjoyed my interactions with PMI in the past, and it's been great to see the feedback coming in from the attendees today, and would have been wonderful if we had done it obviously face to face, and hopefully that will happen sometime soon. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity from the PMI Chennai chapter, and really appreciate all the feedback from the participants today.
Thank you, and we look forward to another interesting session from you later, sometime, hopefully next year at the IIT Madras Research Park.
Absolutely, I was looking forward to that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.